You're with us here on BTTV. Let's take a look at how markets are shaping up today. It is really going to be all about the Fed, and we'll get to that in a moment. But first, on the screen, and remember, after those new highs, we are seeing a touch of a cool off, just about 18,091 on the Nifty, still well above 18,000, and above 60,000 on the Sensex as well, just below that 61,000 mark. I don't know if there's any cricket on today, but you can hear the noise from our newsroom. So clearly something has happened, and we'll try and get you an update on that as well in just a moment. But markets, back to that. Now remember, given the fact that we are seeing a little bit of a cool off. It's not just a bit of profit booking. We're also awaiting any news from the Fed. But in light of that, the fact that we're holding fort is fairly significant. So I want to actually welcome on board Shahina Mukaddam as we take a closer look at what we're watching out for as we wind down trade. Because Shahina, everyone's wondering, given the kind of streak and momentum we've seen, and the kind of energy with which the markets have crossed these new highs, whether or not this will sustain. How much do we still have to worry about what comes out of that Fed meet?
Well, I think it will be more or less in line with expectations. If we see a 75 basis Fed rate hike, which is what everybody is expecting. So unless there's some major, difference from what is the expectations, I think the Indian market should take it in their stride at least.
Okay, let's actually go across to Tanya. Tanya is actually tracking, what is anticipated out of that Fed meet today. So let's also, remind our viewers in terms of what those expectations are. Tanya?
Well, absolutely. Fed is actually expected to raise interest rates by 75 basis points this time around, and markets are prepared for the fourth 75 basis points rate hike in a row. Experts say that they don't expect a significant negative impact on the Indian market if the Fed hikes the rate by 3/4 of a percentage point, and this decision could actually impact the sentiments only for a day or two. But what makes the event more important is hope among market participants that the Fed could signal a slowdown in the pace of rate hikes in future. Because remember, the policy moves in the US also pushed the RBI to raise the policy rate by 190 basis points since May. So we'll be tracking that. And also, experts are of the view that central banks will ultimately have to slow down the magnitude of rate hikes. And they also believe that jobs data from the US after this upcoming rate decision will need to be watched out for, accessing the pace of rate hikes going forward. Back to you.
Thanks for that, Tanya. So that's what we're watching out for from the Fed. Let's just, take a look at how the markets are doing right now. We've got names like Bharti Airtel, Eicher Motors, Maruti trending lower in trade today, Apollo Hospitals, Hindustan Unilever, Hero MotoCorp, a whole host of these names, 1 to 2% of a cool off that we're seeing. But remember the kind of run up we've also seen to those new highs, and we're not too far off those for the moment. But sentimental impact, let's understand better from Shahina if it does come in. Shahina, which pockets of the market do you feel, will really take a knock if there are any kind of reverberations from what happens in the US?
Well, I think companies which have a high debt are likely to be most impacted, and also to an extent, companies which have a lot of exposure on imports. Because in addition to whatever is happening with the interest rates, we also have the rupee, which has depreciated almost 10% in 2022, which actually is impacting their raw material costs. So I think these are the areas which are likely to be impacted. Of course, crude oil prices remaining high is an impact, and especially on our foreign exchange reserves. So, to some extent, that is an issue. But of course, we are protected, unlike Europe, to some extent because of our relationship with Russia and our special arrangements with them. So, to an extent, we are more or less neutral versus the global scenario.
Okay. What are you finding attractive in the markets at these levels, Shine? I don't even know whether to cite valuations because in some cases they've become more reasonable. But on the other hand, we're continuing to see very active buying across the board.
I think a lot of market participants are now looking at the numbers that are coming out,
Yeah.
and the stocks. I mean, the results which are good, decent, better than expected are actually being rewarded, and I see money flowing in there, especially if you see the mid caps and small caps. And companies which are not reporting decent numbers or which are showing pressure in margins, for example, FMCG, like you saw Hindustan Unilever, you saw some of the other companies, very strong companies, Dabur, they're actually seeing some bit of, I would say, consolidation or some bit of weakness. Because they saw pressure on margins because of higher raw material costs. On the other hand, some of the stocks which have done well, like for example, let's take today Reddington. It did really well, and it's a mid cap company, and you're seeing the stock price rally substantially. Similarly, Karnataka Bank, the small bank which really didn't have much exposure in terms of market participants. So I think such numbers which are exciting are being rewarded with very strong buying coming in. But I think more or less the market as a whole will remain in a consolidation phase. I don't see a big move up from current levels over the next 6 months. So I see it's more like a stock pickers market. It's always been, but with the index at current levels, I think it's more so.
Karnataka definitely stands out in today's session, post those numbers. Shahina, I'm going to probe you a little bit more for what else is looking attractive amongst the financials. A few days ago, it was AU. We've seen a lot of course, consistency in performance when it comes to the likes of a federal. What else is looking to you good from the financial basket?
Well, some of these banks, private sector banks, are looking good because you see the whole balance sheet quality has improved substantially. The stressed assets, the book is actually improving. Quality of the book is improving. Credit demand is picking up. So I think more or less, most of these banks, especially the large ones, if I was to take my pick, I would continue to remain with the private sector banks. For example, ICICI Bank has done, of course, well, one of the best performing in stock price over the last 1 year. Also, I think in terms of performance, it has come out with healthy performance. HDFC Bank has consolidated. I think the merger is going to be a very strong positive over the long term, which I don't think the market has still taken, a note of. But in my view, it's a good investment at current levels. And some of the smaller mid cap, small cap banks, like for example, Karnataka has done well today. Not today, one needs to does one definitely doesn't buy it when it's moved up or given such a good move for the day. I would prefer a federal bank, something in the small cap, like something like a DCB bank. It gives you exposure on both sides, the large caps as well as small caps. Some of the NBFCs also have come out with decent numbers, but like Chola. But more or less, I would like to avoid that space for now.
Okay. What about Sun Pharma? We've seen the stock move consistently post earnings, and market cap has now also crossed 2.5 lakh crores. That's after 7 years. Is Sun starting to shine bright again?
Well, I think maybe, but I would still, be cautious while getting into Sun at current levels. Taro is actually pulling down their overall numbers. I see R&D costs also moving up. The numbers were very good, but as you see R&D costs moving up over the next couple of quarters, I see some bit of consolidation coming into Sun. On the other hand, if you were asking me of pharmaceuticals, my top picks would remain something like a Cipla, Dr. Reddy's. I think I would prefer these two. And if I want a dark horse, I would still go with an Arvindo.
All right, fair enough. Auto seems a little bit mixed. What's your take there? Because, sales numbers, we saw an uptick, of course, post festive season, but otherwise on the two wheelers, a little bit lackluster still. Maruti's looking good. Otherwise, overall, what do you feel, Shaina?
Actually, two wheelers, I used to be pretty negative on the space as a whole for quite some time until recently. What has happened actually is that the EV space in two wheelers has actually taken a bit of it's becoming a bit more quiet. At the same time, you have some of the existing two wheeler companies, like we already have a TVS that actually rallied substantially. But I think Bajaj Auto, which is facing some challenges on its export front and its overall growth, is starting to, I would say, show signs that one can start looking at adding or, start entry into these two wheeler stocks. because over the next couple of quarters, things should improve going forward, both with raw material costs coming down as well as I think the overall market picking up. And they do have products in the EV space for the medium to longer term. In four wheelers, I would prefer like the CV space, something like an Ashok Leyland. I think that would be my top pick in the sector. Of course, let me just clarify that I hold a lot of stocks that I'm discussing about. So, that should be taken as small quantities, of course. But, that's my disclosure. And other than that, I think Maruti has given you a good rally. From here on, I think, I would prefer just buying it at dips, not at the current levels.
All right, fair enough. That's the call coming in on Maruti. Few other broader market names. HOEL is up 10% today. Mazgao Dock is up, fairly strongly in today's session. Just pulling out some outliers there as well that are standing out in trade today. Any view on Sun TV, Sharmila?
See, Sun TV, the whole media space is looking decent. If you look at some of the stocks, Z, I think Z after the long bit of correction and then consolidation, I think to an extent is starting to show some momentum. So I would prefer Z as the top pick. Sun, of course, in terms of valuation, is almost now equal to Z. So I think Sun also is looking good. With it is more of a politically, I would say. It is influenced by politics to some extent. So I would prefer a Z. And also you have some of the other stocks which have done well. The smaller ones like you have TV18. I think that also looks pretty decent at current level. So I think the media space as a whole does look good.
Okay. Amidst some of the real estate names, which one's your preferred play?
I think Prestige Estate is doing well. They've expanded out of their the usual domain markets like Bangalore, South India. They've in fact even come to Mumbai. So I think to that extent, it looks like a decent bet with good projects on hand. Valuations also decent. Of course, I would like Godrej Properties. I think it's one of the, I would say, fundamentally stable and strong stock in terms of management quality and the projects that they have on hand almost across India. So I think these two would be something I would prefer for long-term bets. And maybe DLF could be something like you could look for trading because they themselves they have come up with decent numbers and the commentary was pretty strong. So one can look at that also.
Okay, fair enough. A whole host of these pharma names has been a trend the entire week. Gland in particular stands out, and I'll come back to Sharmila on that. But a whole host of gainers, shipping, docs, all of them are also trending higher today. So that's another thematic play. Sugar has been buzzing this week and continues to do so, of course, and a whole host of names on the back of earnings that are moving as well. And the kind of retail consumption theme seems to be intact as well so far in this week, and the kind of stocks that we're seeing trending higher today. But let me come to you on Gland, in fact, Sharmila.
Shahina.
Sorry, Shahina, yes. Go ahead, Shahina.
Okay, yeah, Gland actually disappointed with their numbers, and I was not surprised. Actually, I was actually maintaining that one should book profits or to some extent shift from Gland. So I think the numbers were quite disappointing, and I think the issues with Gland will continue on for some time, both in terms of their raw material as well as their the overall profitability. So I would avoid Gland as of now. I think something in pharma that looks better, like I already mentioned, would be something like a Cipla, a Dr. Reddy. I would prefer these stocks as well as maybe an Arvind.
Okay. The agri plays are also moving, fertilizers, other ancillary plays to the whole agri theme. It's interesting at this time of year, but is it economy related? What do you feel is driving some of the traction there, and is that a space that fits anywhere in your portfolio?
I would say ITC is my top agri pick. Of course, it's not really agri, but it's done well. Both, I would say that it did well in its cigarette business. Margins are good, and in terms of agri, if you talk of agrochemicals, Today, UPL numbers were decent. So I think one can look at a basket of these stocks. Chemical stocks also, specialty chemicals also should do well, because we've seen that India now has a cost advantage over Europe. So some of the manufacturing will come to India, and earlier China used to, be the preferred sourcing base, but now I think the shift is happening towards India, and we do have an edge in terms of manufacturing chemicals. So I think that space, while currently they are facing some pressure on margins because of higher raw material costs, I think over a period of time, if you're a long-term investor, chemical stocks look decent, which include agrochemicals, specialty chemicals.
All right. I'm going back to some of those financials as well now. UCO Bank is another one that stands out. Sharmila, I'm going to come to you on UCO as well, because that's another one of the buzzers in today's session.
I would avoid some of the small cap PSU banks. Maximum you can use them as trading bets. I would just avoid them. You know why? I don't think this is a trading market. If you're an investor, better to be slowly acquire some of the large cap stocks. SBI, if you want to be in PSU, Canara Bank. It is. I mean, there is some talk that Canara Bank could be included in the MSCI index. So, I mean, if you really want to add PSU stocks, I think those will be the preferred bets.
All right. Shaina, great speaking with you. I'm sorry for that slip of tongue. Both Sharmila and you are some of our favorite guests, so sorry
Thank
for that.
you.
But
No
great
problem.
chatting with you today, and thank you for patiently taking us through all of these various stocks that have been, catching our attention in today's session. And let's see what comes out of that Fed meet as well. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank
So as Shahina there clearly mentioned, we are watching out for what comes out of the Fed meet, even though it's likely to be in line with expectations. There's still a lot of nervousness around, whether or not it will have any impact on sentiment. But having said that, markets have been on a firm footing this week. Even today, they're just off their highs. There's really nothing so perturbing about those levels, given the kind of gains we've seen the last few sessions. So it's looking good. And in terms of the kind of names that stood out today, we saw a mix from financials, from some of the pharma names on earnings. So Karnataka Bank, Sun Pharma continuing on earnings. Tech Mahindra up about 1% or so on earnings as well. We saw Tata Motors, DRL hold steady, some of these other nifty gainers. Advances today were a little bit fewer than than declines, which outpaced advances, but the cuts were limited in the session overall. And a fair amount of stocks were also unchanged for the moment, at least on the exchange. So now the broader markets, that's where we saw a lot of traction as well. Stocks like a Massdown Dock were up like 16, 17%. Cochin Shipyard up 7, 8% today. GE Shipping was moving as well, so I found that theme kind of interesting. From the pharma names, Gland Pharma, Alembic, a whole host of these, Aster DM Health, continuing to see some amount of buzz coming in on that front as well. Sun TV stood out. Vedanta was up about 3% in today's session. Tata Motors was holding strong as well. And retail plays like Shoppers Stop, Bata, a whole host of those. The agri theme, whether it be a Praj, whether it be fertilizer companies, hotels have also been looking good the whole week. Chalet was up 2% today. Indian Hotels has been holding strong as well. Max Healthcare was up about 2%. NIIT another 2% on that one. So broader markets are fairly active. Sugar stocks have been looking strong. Real estate as well. Indiabulls Real Estate Prestige was up 2%. So we, saw a mixed bag overall in the sector, but a couple of those key names have definitely been standing out overall. So, a pretty decent set of gainers there. If you see the broader markets, Nifty 18,074, Sensex 6884 is what we're looking at. Advanced decline, actually, if you see the final tally on your screen, it's almost even. Minor, bias towards the declines. Tech Mahindra, of course, with the big earnings today, and the stock has held out after those earnings as well. And so that was the major newsmaker in today's session on the back of results. But other than that, all eyes really on what's going to come out of the Fed meet, and they are expected to pretty much do a hike in line with expectations, but the commentary, that's what we always watch out for from the Fed. Will this sound hawkish? Will they sound dovish? We've of course had a lot of initial speculation and indications that they're going to ease off a little bit, given that growth seems to be intact, and in order to really maintain steadiness in the market as opposed to any kind of further knee-jerk reactions. But let's wait and see what call they finally take, in that meet. So that's where we leave it on today's edition of Market Closing, and we'll wait and see what else is in store as we have 2 more trading sessions left for this week. Thanks so much for watching.